this is part of the group. So we're going to go ahead and introduce just our three panelists today. We have a great panelist on CHIPS funding and SBIR. So we have Morgan Dwyer, who's coming to us virtually through Zoom, and she's the Chief Strategy Officer for the CHIPS Program Office. And then we have Ben Linville Engler. Did I say that? I always reverse.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
It's good. You got the order.
Thank you. He's the Ecosystem Investment Strategy for MassTech Collaborative. And then we have Mark Smithers, who's the CTO and the co-founder of Boston Engineering Corp. So we're going to go ahead and get started with you, Morgan. You are good to go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So sorry that I can't be there with you today in person, but really excited to share a little bit more about the work we're doing at the CHIPS for America program at the Department of Commerce. So if we can go to, we're on slide 2. That's right. Okay. So to start, I just wanted to sort of briefly revisit the overall vision for the CHIPS program. There's 3 major policy objectives. The first is economic security, national security, and then future innovation. Look, we need to establish chip production here at home if we're going to protect our economic and national security against disruptions outside of our control. You know, as an example, natural disasters or public health emergencies like COVID-19 disrupt supply chains, and it puts American jobs that are dependent on chips at risk. We also believe our ability to continue to innovate and lead the way on future technology really depends on new ways of making chips. Currently, the United States produces very few of the world's most advanced chips. And at Chips for America, we really aspire to make the United States a global leader in leading edge chip production. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the CHIPS and Science Act was signed into law on August of 2022. And really, Congress created a set of programs that was intended to restore U.S. leadership in semiconductor manufacturing. And that's what the Department of Commerce is implementing. The Manufacturing Incentives Program, and then a series of programs that are designed to grow the microelectronics and semiconductor R&D ecosystem. So the CHIPS Act strategy has been informed by extensive engagement with semiconductor industry leaders and by experts in academia, nonprofits, local, state, and federal government, public-private entities, national security entities, labor leaders, and international partners and allies. So if we go to the next slide, please. So where we are today in terms of CHIPS for America funding. So we are accepting applications for the first of 3 funding opportunities on the manufacturing incentives side of CHIPS for America. Really, you know, we believe that the United States has got to move quickly on building out leading edge facilities, as well as on building out the current and mature node facilities that are really critical to our country's economic and national security. And that's why we released our first notice of funding opportunity in February of 2023 that was focused on those topics, commercial leading edge, current and mature node facilities. In late spring, Commerce plans to release another funding announcement that's going to be focused on material suppliers and equipment manufacturers. And in the fall, we plan to announce a funding opportunity that will support the construction of semiconductor R&D facilities that are going to further strengthen the U.S. semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem. I really want to stress, though, that all companies, no matter which funding opportunity is best suited for them, are invited to file a statement of interest to let us know of their interest in CHIPS funding. So even though the first funding opportunity is directed towards chip makers, we know how important the broader semiconductor supply chain and our R&D efforts are to creating a competitive ecosystem for semiconductor manufacturing. And that's really why we want to hear from everybody and encourage folks to submit statements of interest that'll help inform and prepare the CHIPS Program Office to make historic investments in semiconductor manufacturing. If we go to the next slide, which is just a transition slide, which is to say I'm going to, in the next couple of slides, provide a little bit more information about the first CHIPS funding opportunity. So if we go to the next slide, slide 6, which shows program priorities. So this slide is going to give you an overview of sort of the 6 core priorities that we're implementing here with at the CHIPS Program Office. So, you know, the architects of the CHIPS Act really recognize that we have a historic opportunity to create a robust manufacturing and research and development ecosystem that will result in training, education, and good jobs, and therefore strong communities, as well as U.S. technological leadership in a sector that really enables kind of every other sector, including national security. And so the CHIPS Program Office really, you know, to further those high-level strategic objectives, the CHIPS Program Office established the program priorities that you see here to really guide how applications are going to be evaluated. So the current funding opportunity that I mentioned before is really seeking applications that demonstrate the 6 criteria that you see on this slide. So I'm going to run through them really quickly. So the first is economic and national security. So we passed the CHIPS Act with strong bipartisan support because it is critical to the long-term national security of the United States. And so that's going to be the primary lens that we are using to evaluate every application as part of this process. The second dimension that we're going to look at is commercial viability. So applications should demonstrate that they have an understanding of risks and mitigation strategies, demand and other sources of the product, customers, and if possible, customer commitments, and the useful life of a facility and the necessary investments that are required to prevent obsolescence of that facility. The third criteria is financial strength. We're looking to catalyze private investment, not replace it. And so our incentives are intended to spur domestic manufacturing in a way that would not have been otherwise possible. And so therefore, applicants should structure the finances of their project in a way that maximizes private sector contributions and ultimately minimizes the need for government incentives. The fourth criteria is project technical feasibility and readiness. We're really looking for applicants to provide a clear project execution plan, including for major construction and operational milestones, construction rights and permits, and key contractual agreements. And we're also looking for them to demonstrate their readiness to meet environmental and permitting requirements. The last 2 items I'll run through quickly. One is on workforce development. We really believe that workforce is essential to make companies successful, and therefore it's really sort of the cornerstone of our ability to meet our national and economic security goals. And then finally, on broader impacts, we're really interested in how projects will make a difference in areas like research and development, opportunities for diverse and small businesses, environmental stewardship, and community vitality. So if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about 2 of those criteria, starting with economic security. This is really about supply chain issues, which I imagine is something that many of you are familiar with. And so when we're thinking about economic security on the CHIPS program, we're really looking to evaluate the extent to which an application addresses economic security and the potential for supply chain disruptions. So we're seeking to invest in projects that meaningfully increase U.S. semiconductor production and strengthen U.S. supply chains, with a particular emphasis on projects that will mitigate risks from supply chain shocks that are associated with geographic concentration, with the geographic concentrations that exist in the current semiconductor supply chain. So we're especially seeking projects that align with our strategic needs, that create more resilient supply chains, that build foundry or capacity that serves many different customers, that are able to attract supplier workforce and other investments, and that ultimately contribute to a self-sustaining ecosystem that is able to catalyze future upgrades. You can also see on the slide a little bit more information about how we are thinking about economic security in the 3 different categories of facilities that are eligible for this NOFO: leading edge, current generation, and mature node facilities and back-end production. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through those today, but there's more information here as well as on our website. Let's go to the next slide, which talks about broader impacts. So, ensuring the security and resilience of the semiconductor supply chain and strengthening the leadership of the U.S. in semiconductor technology really is going to require sustained investment in the U.S. semiconductor ecosystem. And that's why we are committed to building strong communities that are able to participate in the prosperity of the semiconductor industry, as well as ensuring that taxpayer investments are really maximizing benefits for the U.S. economy. And so therefore, we're interested in how projects will create broader impacts across all of those dimensions. A couple of impacts that I will highlight here is creating inclusive opportunities for businesses, perhaps a business like some of yours. So the CHIPS Incentive Program really strives for the inclusion of minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and small businesses to be part of any funded projects, and really considers this to be an important criteria when we're evaluating applications. I also want to highlight that we have a domestic content preference. So our application criteria includes the strength of intent to use domestically produced iron, steel, and construction materials. So let's go to the next slide, which is just to highlight that I'm going to talk a little bit about research and development. So if we go to the next slide, slide 10. So the other part of the CHIPS program is really focused on research and development. And the CHIPS Act really specified the creation of 4 different types of programs that would enable R&D. These programs will share infrastructure, participants, and projects, and they're going to operate in coordination with each other, as well as with the manufacturing incentives program that I just talked about. So I'll go through a couple of these programs quickly. So the National Semiconductor Technology Center is really envisioned as being the anchor for the CHIPS R&D program. It's going to provide shared capabilities to help reduce the cost and increase the speed of commercialization of new ideas and train a new generation of technical talent. We will also have a National Advanced Packaging Manufacturing Program, which will help us skip U.S. capacity ahead to advanced packaging in order to enable us to regain our leadership in that particular area. We're also going to fund up to 3 new Manufacturing USA institutes that are focused on semiconductor manufacturing. And we also have NIST metrology R&D, which is going to conduct the measurement science that's critical to developing new materials and packaging, which of course are really critical to semiconductor manufacturing. So that NIST metrology work has been underway for quite some time. But moving forward, we plan to stand up the NSTC, the National Semiconductor Technology Center, first, followed by the packaging program, and then the Manufacturing USA Institute or institutes. So more to follow on the R&D side. And if we go to the final slide, slide 11, really just want to conclude by just stressing that this is just the start of our work at CHIPS for America and what we believe will be a long-term transformational program. We really want to encourage everyone to participate by submitting an application to the current or future funding opportunities, by submitting a statement of interest, or by talking to chip makers in your supply chain to find out if you can be part of their engagement with CHIPS for America. Also want to encourage folks to watch for ways to benefit from and contribute to the R&D and workforce programs that will be forthcoming. And then finally, just want to highlight to everybody, we've released lots of materials on our website, which is chips.gov. So encourage folks to check that out and also sign up for updates from CHIPS. That's all from me, and happy to turn it over to the next speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Morgan.
All right, well, thanks everybody. as Christy mentioned, my name is Ben Wendell. I'm the Chief Investment Strategist for the MassTech Technology Collaborative. We are one of the state's quasi economic development agency. That's sister agency of ours. I'm going to take you through a little bit about what we're doing in CHIPS, but first let me step out and talk on the broader landscape. I think a little bit of what Timothy Murray shared this morning about some of the other federal opportunities going on right now. Might get a better sense of where you're engaged. Who here has heard of the modern American industrial policy? So, and Morgan, you might correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes this term is used, sometimes it's not on different webinars, but it includes things like the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Department of Defense technology for an era of competition. It includes the CHIPS and Science Act. It includes the Federal Critical Supply Chain report that came out in February 2022. It includes the Inflation Reduction Act. It includes announcements around biotechnology, biomanufacturing. So there's lots of different areas in which the federal government is funding manufacturing, commercial technology, defense technology, and the infrastructure around that, clean tech and other areas as well. Some of the things that are talked about in those documents I just shared, a list of different emerging technologies of interest, a lot of opportunities for the existing manufacturing USA institutes that are focused on manufacturing technologies, defense technology. You may notice that there's some that are listed on multiple different areas. So I share this, and these slides will be shared with you all because you may be one working with companies that work on these different technologies. You may be integrated yourself, and a lot of these can be brought to bear or are part of the CHIPS Act, which I'll dive into. As Morgan highlighted, as it relates to like why semiconductors, why microelectronics, why this big CHIPS Act, in those domestic production or the critical supply chain reports, of which I think there are about 12, semiconductors and microelectronics enable so much of everything that was on this list here. So the economic security that we need, economic development opportunity, is really anchored in semiconductors and microelectronics. Whether it's for things like batteries or for offshore wind, we've got a lot going on. We are dependent upon electronics and some of the different sensors that are involved with that. So what's Massachusetts doing to position ourselves as a state, organizations, and companies, academic institutions that are within Massachusetts or the region, and to participate in this sort of once in a generation opportunity? Well, actually back in May of 2021, we formed of the CHIPS Act, what was at the time the Massachusetts Semiconductor Coalition. We have grown in the last 2 years to include a broader Northeast region coalition I'll talk a little bit about. As of late, when we submitted a DoD proposal, it was 85 organizations from across 8 states. We have 40 more in the on-deck circle. So I bring this up because if you're not sure where to start or where to get involved, this can be a really great place to go. I forgot the hyperlink for how to go to this. I will make sure that's shared with you all afterwards. But if you go to our Center for Advanced Manufacturing at MassTech, there's information about it. So when the CHIPS Act was signed in August of last year, that was sort of a big moment for the coalition to say, all right, now rubber's going to hit the road. What are the different opportunities that we can pursue? Which ones might be as a coalition? Which one might be businesses, which might be other different joint partnerships. So we've broken this down into a few different buckets of funding, but at a high level, $54.2 billion does sound like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. But when you put that in context of some of these leading edge fab facilities that Morgan's describing want to build across the US, those can cost anywhere from 12 to 20 billion. So it is intended to bring in private, third party, maybe state or other local support into this, right? 54 billion is a lot, but it's going to take all of us to actually realize this economic and national security opportunity. The first program out the gate was this CHIPS for American Defense Fund. The Department of Defense released what was called a microelectronics commons opportunity that we, as a coalition, submitted a set of proposals to in February. I'll have one slide on that here coming up with a little bit more information. Department of Defense is very dependent upon a vibrant domestic commercial production ecosystem for microelectronics, because if you don't make it here, we can't build it here elsewhere. Morgan mentioned the manufacturing incentives program is open. It's a 39 billion set of opportunities. R&D incentives, she's, fall end of 2023. And then there's also a public wireless opportunity that's open as well. State of Massachusetts, the blessing and the curse that we have a vibrant opportunity in all of these. And so how do we organize and make sure we're supporting the broad set of stakeholders we have going after this? So for that DoD ME Commons proposal, there's more information on our website to learn about this. DoD is looking to establish 9 regional technology hubs, leveraging some pre-existing facilities, but the whole area of the life cycle is from the lab to fab, specifically around secure edge, IoT computing, 5G, 6G technologies, AI hardware, quantum tech, electromagnetic warfare, and commercial leap ahead technologies. We are anticipating to hear back from DoD in the next, hopefully, weeks or months here on the process of this proposal, but this is sort of the one initial swing that we're going after with this. This was supposed to be a build slide, so I'll try to talk through it in sequence, but as it relates to those manufacturing incentives and the opportunities that Morgan just shared, leading edge fabrication facilities, current generation mature node and backend facilities, material suppliers and equipment producers, and then the research and development facilities. Those are all falling under these manufacturing incentives. $39 billion in direct funding, up to $75 billion in loan and loan guarantees, and then also a requirement for state and local incentive support. So the first goal we have with the state of Massachusetts, how do we ensure that any of our partners pursuing any of these have what's considered a complete application? So we've opened up a portal, am.masstech.org, CHIPS incentives. You'll see the same diagram here, but we want you to come to us so that we can help support you with those state and local incentives. We'll be basically triaging project applications towards capital programs, workforce programs, a whole suite of different tools that we have in our toolbox at MassTech across other quasi and state programs, so that we can make sure we're matching the right resources to your needs based off of what you're pursuing. Now, in our state, what we are seeing thus far, we have quite a few organizations and companies that you may be aware of that are going after current generation and mature node opportunities, or we actually have a lot of material suppliers and equipment state as well, companies that make the equipment, that make the semiconductor. Those may not be going into facilities in Massachusetts, those may be going into facilities in Ohio, Texas, Arizona, and Florida. So organizations are scaling in the state to help those supply chains as well. It's not just about chips or batteries, though. I think a really great point from the keynote right before the breakout is it is about the supply chain. It is about the value chain. There's projects, large and small scale, going on all across the U.S. right now in response to this CHIPS incentive. The Treasury Department has different tax credits available as you're supporting or engaging in these opportunities. It's about those materials. It's also about the production of test equipment. So if you're not sure if you're a chip producer, that's okay. As Morgan mentioned, it's also about how you engage with the chip producer. You may be second tier, third tier in this value chain that's going to help the nation from a national and economic security standpoint. So don't just think about, am I going to be a direct recipient, but could I be an indirect recipient? On the other side of it, it's also thinking about, am I a customer of some of these components? Because one of the aspects of these applications that Morgan's team is going to be receiving is, do you have customers? Do you have market for these? If we're going to be building these here, right? We're not just building capacity that's going to go nowhere, but maybe you're a consumer of some of these devices. So this is kind of that last slide view of, think about maybe where you fit into this. And I'll just kind of reiterate, a great place to start if you're not sure is the coalition that we built for the Northeast region. I also want to highlight, in almost every one of these pictures, you see people. And so talent, workforce development at all levels are really critical to this, whether that's in Massachusetts, whether that's in the Cleveland region, Northeast region, or across the US. So another role that we have is helping to connect you with the it's for chips or other things in manufacturing to community colleges, vocational technical schools, our K-12 system, and how do we make an integrated response to this? Happy to take questions at the end.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a change, but this is to inform you some opportunities you may have using SBIRs to manufacture. But I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective. Boston Engineering's been around for 28 years. We were in, my partner and I were in a SBIR-based company, but saw that they weren't doing all the design for manufacturing, all the DFX things needed. So we embarked on building that first. That's in the middle. We then started going after the SBIR program and to develop technologies. And as Ben said, these don't build away. We started back in 2007. It's building our own and leveraging the capacity we have. And I won't go into this one here. This is the slides are going to be available to anybody if they want to follow up after. So the traditional thinking of the SBIR companies are innovators who have great ideas. They're creating the possible from the impossible. And the objective is that these companies are to get their technology developed, do feasibility, and progress it, learn how to do manufacturing, learn how to do commercialization. Boston Engineering's like that, a little different, but we're more in that traditional model. Flipping the script are for the manufacturers. You already have capacity. You already are in business. The risk profile is much lower. What you don't have is all that front-end innovation stuff. So one of the things we're going to talk about is working with MassMEP. How do we get that innovation side so that you can build the innovation piece, get all that non-equity diluting funds into your company, so you then can use that manufacturing capacity that you have. That's the next goal, working with the MEPs. So the SBIR system's essentially a three-phase process. A bunch of companies get together, or topics put out, and I'm going to use the DoD as an example, noting that the NIH and other agencies do similar things, slightly different, but basic premises there. A bunch of companies submit a topic. Let's say it's 75 companies submit a topic. 2 to 4 of those are picked. So you've already been competed. You already have been selected to get 2 or 4, somewhere between 100,000 and 240,000, to work on a specific problem that they've given you, and to show them that you have a feasible way to solve that problem. Those 2 to 4 companies compete to get typically one phase 2. Those phase 2s are 1 million to 1.8, and those numbers keep going up for a period of time. Now, if you don't do the SBIR type systems, you have to use your own money to make all these things happen. So the government's giving you money to help create capabilities to solve their problems, but it will let you build capability that you can then take commercially. They want you to commercialize. And I'll get into in a second the benefits of why being a phase 2 awardee matters. So, okay, the big benefits. SBIR data rights. So a lot of times you hear the government, in the past, people haven't trusted the government, so someone's going to take our technology. You have what they call SBIR data rights. It's a copyright law. The government has the rights to use the technology. They do not have the rights to take your technology based on copyright law. So they're giving you money to help solve their problem, but they're not going to take it. They want you to be a commercial manufacturer. Sole source contracts. So a lot of people who haven't gotten into the government space, there's a lot of competition. I don't know how to do this competition. If you win a phase 2, you have rights to sole source, meaning the government, if they like your idea, they don't have to bid it. You're an SBIR phase 2 awardee. They can sole source, they can designate sole source and give you the contract without having anybody, if they like your technology. Exemption from small business size standards. What does that mean? Why is it relevant? If your company gets bought with all these great sole source SBIR benefits, the company that buys you has the right to leverage the sole source contract, even though they may be 3,000 people instead of 500. So you get a benefit. A lot of larger companies are going after the smaller companies because of what you've achieved, what you would have achieved in a phase two feasibility and sole source capacity. There's no dollar limits on phase SBIR technologies. They can give you a $50 million contract if it's something that's going to solve a need in the government. The phase three mandate is similar to, you heard it this morning about the domestic buy American, right? The mandate in the SBIR is, to the extent possible, you will select an SBIR funded company over somebody else. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits to going with that, and you can read this, and if you have any questions, you can follow with me after. So who's eligible for this? It's small businesses. It needs to be 50% owned by U.S. or U.S. persons. Basically, small business is 500 people right now. That hasn't moved in a long time. That may go up. So if you're a business that's 500 people or less, you're eligible to go after any SBIR and any of the agencies there. And any of the agencies are not just the DoD. There's SBA, there's NSF, there's all NIH. If you're doing medical products, clean tech, all these SBIRs are out there for you to go after. So how do you get there? What do you do? Well, first, you can work with the MEPs. And if you're Mass, you go to MassMEP, and they'll help you connect to different places. But there's the Apex accelerators. They used to be called PTACs in the area. They are paid to help you understand the systems, write proposal, figure out strategies for which ones to go after. They're there in place to help you so that you don't have to figure it all out yourself. So not only can you go to Apex directly, you can go to an MEP, in this case, MassTech. So, how does all this work? The government puts out solicitations. They say, here's our problem. And I'm going to use a Army one. It's a warfighter gap. We need to do something. Which one did I pick here? Food and water sensor for sustainment of joint expeditionary force. Seems like a lot of words. What is that? I don't know. But you read the objective, you read the description, and you go through and it gives you the objective description, what they want in phase one, what they want in phase two. And the advice I tell everyone is you must talk to the TPOC because they'll write what they can. It's 2 or 3 pages max. The TPOC is the technical point of contact with the government. They'll tell you all the inside stuff that maybe wasn't written, and that helps you write a good proposal. This is, again, it'll be, they're going to get copies. Okay. The schedules are put out based on all the agencies, so you can take a look at them. You should look at some of the topics. You should check in with the MEPs. You should check in with the Apex and try to figure out which ones match your strategy. What do you manufacture? How do I fit? Where do I want to go? Right. And part of this, when you do it, that strategy is you need to think of it as a portfolio pipeline. You're going to go after technologies that leverage what you've built today, that start helping you get to where you want to be tomorrow. And you need to manage that portfolio and look at the synergies as you go and manage it like it's a portfolio of money. You manage it as a portfolio of technologies that allow you to expand your manufacturing operation. And one of the techniques that we have used that's been very powerful is to bundle. So you take a bunch of different agencies, you build one thing, then another agency wants another little piece. So you take what you built in the first one, and you can build something new, and then another one, and every time you go to another agency, you're adding a little piece. You don't have to figure out how to do something new 100%. You should be looking at things that add a little bit of capacity and capability that plugs into your infrastructure so that you can leverage all that dollars and not have to reinvent new things for your operation. And another example is in not only the technology areas, but in a certain segment. So if you're in clean tech, or you're in the shipyard industry, start looking at technologies that help the overall thing, whether it's a robot, whether it's a sensor, whether it's something that helps workforce, a digital tool, something like that you're manufacturing, you're getting out in the marketplace. Think about how do you connect it, just like IoT is connected to so many things. connect what you're doing to all the different technologies that the government wants.
Thank you guys very much. Nice job. So I think we're down to like 3 minutes, Sean. So we have a couple of questions that are here for Morgan, but before we get into that, does anybody have any questions for Ben and Mark?
Verify about the hubs that have been the 9 hubs, and so Massachusetts is looking into the 6 areas of the hubs. And what is the timeline of that, and how does workforce development fit into those 6?
Yeah, so the Department of Defense put out a request for solutions. They want to create up to 9 hubs, right, nationally, across those different technology areas. You could submit a proposal for 1 or more of those technology areas. For the Northeast Microelectronics Hub proposal, we submitted a sort of a unified hub that could be capable of all those technologies. The timeline for review of those proposals across the nation is they're midstream in reviewing them. Based on what they've told us, announcements of awards could happen sometime over the summer or into early fall. So we'll have a better sense, in the next few months of where they liked our proposal. Is it potentially all 6? Maybe it'll be a certain set of the technology areas. We're optimistic that we've put some really strong proposals together. We've got a really great coalition. It's not just 1 or 2 institutions, but again, a pretty broad set of active partners in industry, government. Workforce is a critical part of that. What's unclear to us right now is the way the DoD proposal, the request for proposals was written. Are they funding things in aggregate at the hub level for workforce, or are they going to be funding it at subsequent project calls that they're going to run? But this is where we're taking the work of our coalition, which is a big focus on workforce, and looking ahead to some of these other opportunities that Morgan spoke about of where else maybe we could be able to pursue dollars specific to workforce, or if it's not the federal level, how do we do this?
And how quickly the funding is made available?
Yeah, it depends on each of these different programs and their timelines. I think some of these dollars they're trying to get at least the awards out by the end of this fiscal year for the federal government. But it's going to be.
Before I jump to Morgan, any questions for Mark on SBIR? All right, Morgan, you're on. She's still with us? There she is. So number 2 is my question. How does Commerce plan to ensure that small and medium-sized businesses are involved during CHIPS program implementation?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So in the earlier discussion, I at least tried to give you a little flavor of our commitment to diversity, which is really encouraging manufacturers who receive CHIPS incentives to work with the entire ecosystem, right, which includes small and medium-sized businesses. So a couple of examples of how we're doing that. So one, we are asking applicants for CHIPS incentives to demonstrate how they will make investments in facilities and equipment in the U.S. And we really anticipate that that's going to translate into opportunities for America's small and medium-sized builders and machine fabricators. We're also asking applicants to increase the resiliency of their supply chains, which may mean working with domestic small and medium-sized suppliers of chemicals, instruments, and other materials. And so I really think that as we started off at the beginning saying that economic and national security, and in particular supply chain resilience, that's the core objective of the program. And obviously small and medium-sized businesses are core contributors to supply chain security. And so we see them being a key contributor to the larger ecosystem that we're building.
Well, thank you.